because I've covered this conference a couple of times before. It's got Bishop Easterling, very gifted, very progressive liberal, former lawyer, very powerful speaker, Easterling. I went through their annual conference last year and showed some of the dysfunction there. She and her conference trustees made it almost impossible to disaffiliate from the Baltimore-Washington Conference. They put a policy in place that is very expensive. According to, I don't want to misspeak, but I was talking with somebody in her conference the other day, said one church had to pay $4 million to get out. Can you imagine? They only had 24 disaffiliations, and they amounted to $10 million to get out. So there are a lot of churches that just couldn't afford that. 37 of them decided to file suit with the National Center for Life and Liberty. Last year, that suit's been ongoing. Original signs were promising that they might prevail. The conference failed to file some paperwork on time and were publicly corrected for it. But then, as you'll see in the headline here, Maryland judge rules against 37 churches suing the UMC over a property dispute. Here's what it says. A Maryland judge, this is a name worth knowing, Michael Grabowski. He writes about a lot of mainline denominational fallout stuff. So he's really fair so far as I'm concerned. He writes, a Maryland judge has ruled against 37 churches that sued a regional body of the UMC, claiming that the rules for allowing them to depart the denomination were unfair. Judge Michael Malone of the Circuit Court for Anne Arundel County issued an order and opinion last Friday siding with the UMC Baltimore-Washington Conference in the disaffiliation process dispute. Malone upheld the conference's claim that the denomination had, quote, an irrevocable trust, end quote, over the properties of the UMC, including the church buildings belonging to the congregation seeking disaffiliation. Quote, Maryland law provides that trust is presumed irrevocable unless the power to revoke has been reserved, wrote Malone. Quote, and there is no language in the trust clauses in the discipline reserving the right to revoke. Thus, the trust created is irrevocable, end quote. So you find this in different legal settings. Hypothetically, such a right exists. However, it hasn't been designed, so it doesn't exist. You found this in the United Methodist Church when disaffiliation was approaching, and they were thinking, well, we have the right as an annual conference to disaffiliate from the UMC. And what do you know? They did have the right, but they never designed a process for it. So actually, even though they had the right, they couldn't do it. So similarly here, you can have a trust and you can revoke a trust, but because the Book of Discipline doesn't provide for how to revoke that trust, it's irrevocable. Quote, defendants in this case are entitled to summary judgment on this claim as the local churches consented to the authority of the denomination, and the local church properties are merely held by the churches in trust for the UMC. Bishop Latrell Miller Easterling, head of the Baltimore-Washington Conference, said in a statement emailed to the Christian Post that she was, quote, grateful to have this matter resolved, end quote. With such critical needs facing our communities as food insecurity, addiction recovery, access to affordable health care, etc., our focus should be on mission and ministry. It is my prayer that everyone will turn their attention to these Christ-centered needs. So the inference being there, concerns about the purity of the church or the liberty of believers to follow their conscience, those are really not important at all. Who cares about the purity of the church? We just need to be concerned about doing good works as we understand them. The bishop also said she believed it was, quote, important to note that this decision rightly upholds the trust clause and the agency of annual conference trustees. Regarding the decision, one of the plaintiffs in the case, who asked to remain anonymous, emailed a statement expressing disappointment with the order and accusing the conference of, quote, financial malfeasance, greed, and unjust harm toward the local congregations, end quote. Quote, most of, if not all, the local congregations in this case have never received any financial support from the conference and have built and maintained their properties from the sacrificial giving of their congregants, he stated. And yet the conference chooses to act akin to Pharaoh in the book of Exodus and the scribes whom Christ himself describes in Luke chapter 20. While this decision from Judge Malone, who himself is a United Methodist layperson and opted not to recuse himself from the case, is a bit of a momentum killer, we will consult our legal counsel to discern what our next steps might be. So it remains to be seen if they are going to if they're going to appeal the case and try to do it again, or if they're going to try a different tack. Of course, one of the things that I've recommended is I just think it's theologically really hard. And I've had Dan Dalton write me and say, this is bad legal advice. I'm not giving legal advice, in my opinion. I'm giving theological advice. I just think it's bad to file against people in court. I think it's better to put them in a position to file against you. It seems to be working well in Rio, Texas, although the Rio, Texas conference has appealed, and we'll see. It could get undone there. But it seems to me that it would be interesting, at least, if you've already got this money in this church you're going to lose, then you can spend it. You can either walk away from it, which I think would be a travesty, or you can file legally against a party, and I don't like that very much, or you can just leave and do your own thing and put them in the position to file against you and then exhaust your funds fighting them in court. That makes sense to me. A defensive position makes much more sense to me. But also for people who just want to get up and go and leave, yes, there's an abundant amount of scripture just saying, why not rather be wronged? Why not rather be defrauded? And if that's how they want to be, then let them be that way. I am not going to shame you. It's not, you have this money, you should go to war with it. You have your war chest. That's a worldly way of thinking. And I'm not going to shame other people who think that way and want to defend the legacy entrusted to them. I just, all the way along, I've frustrated a lot of people. I haven't taken a side on this because I think there's wonderful, faithful people who have chosen different tacks. So I don't know what they're going to do. I'm not going to pretend to have any insider information. I know that they've let at least one church go that was black after disaffiliation ended, but they had to pay out the nose for it, and there was a huge, long procedure. And I know there are at least 4 black churches that wanted out and have been denied. So I'm going to be talking to, hopefully, the leadership there and see if any of them want to talk to me.